G'day everyone, Stephanie again from Diesel Tech. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be showcasing to you the basics of servicing your vehicle yourself, the DIY style, should you wish to do so. I've been in a trade, not on vehicles though, on earth moving, but I've been in a diesel trade for quite a couple of years. As a matter of fact, I think it's exactly approaching 2 decades now by this stage. So I'll be showing you the basics on what to look out for and what you can see just by looking at some of your lubricants and filters once they've been removed, and how to replenish everything and put it back safely. And again, should you not be comfortable doing this, please approach somebody professional, or if you prefer sticking around to your local service dealer or your dealership for your vehicle itself, then obviously approach them to do your services. But for those who wish to tackle it yourself, or maybe just do the minor services in between, stick around because I'll be showing you what to do. So tools required for the basic service. In order to move the sump cord, you need a 13 size socket. For the bolts, you need a 14 size socket for the sump plug for the oil drainage, and you need some form of ratchet or power bar like this one, but I would, for the sump guard, rather go for the ratchet so you don't unnecessarily strain the thread on the plug. And you need a filter strap for the engine oil filter. The rest of the tools is pretty much what you would require for doing a major service, which is what I'm about to do on a Hilux. So that includes the 24 socket, and the 24 socket goes onto your transfer case, drain and filler plug, transmission drain filler, rear differential drain and filler plug. And you would then only need your 10mm Allen key for the front differential, and then I just put a small piece of pipe or tube over it sometimes just for that extra bit of leverage, just to help you get the plug loosened up initially. And the power bar I use for the transfer case, transmission and rear diff plugs on a 24 size socket, and then just some basic cleaning kit for in case you need to remove some debris or sand and stuff around the plugs. And of course the lubrication tool, which is the grease pump for the prop shaft lubrication points going towards the rear. And then one last thing you would also require as part of your tooling kit is at least some form of bucket, at least I would say a 10-liter capacity, in order to drain the engine oil, because I think the Hilux's, the 3-liter D4D takes about 6.5 to 7 liters of oil. Right, so besides only the service parts itself, what I usually do is I just have a look for everything that looks out of the ordinary, especially leakage for the coolant system and or oil or diesel. I did replace the belt not too long ago, so I know the belt's fine. I've changed this bearing on this idler pulley as well, so now the belt and cooling system is okay. Nothing out of the ordinary here. And the same applies for underneath the vehicle, so anything on the suspension that looks out of the ordinary. So for those that has got what we call a bash plate or belly plate on the bottom of the vehicles, for protection you will take this, remove this first in order to get to the front differential and the engine oil sump, where we'll be draining the oils and lubricants for those two components. Once you've removed the belly plate or the sump guard, you will see just above this cross member there's the draining plug for the engine oil that takes a 14 socket. So when it comes to removing the oil filter, as for most any other devices or plugs in the industry going forward, that's a general rule of thumb. It's not like that 100% of the time, but viewed from the top, so whether the filter sits, you viewing it from literally from the top, it's sitting upright, or whether it's viewed from the bottom upwards. The general rule of thumb is when you put your hand over it, left is loose and right is tight. Usually do is after I've removed the filter, I will take a couple of oil rags and clean it up nicely over here, but make sure that the equipment that you use is clean enough in order not to have any debris going into this housing, because this, I would say, is one of the most sensitive parts of the vehicle, is the lubrication system. So you want to keep that thing as clean, microscopic clean as humanly possible while doing this. And then when it comes to the filter, what I usually do is, you will see there is some form of lubrication, or some form of lube on the sealing surface, which helps it, just go on smoothly and ensure that the O-ring doesn't pinch, or the seal. But what I usually do is I take just the fingertip fresh engine oil, clean engine oil. I give it another run just to be sure that everything is hunky-dory, because in my career, in my trade, I found that sometimes if you put on the filters dry, it works fine until you get to the next service and you have to remove it. Then it sometimes becomes one hell of a mission in order to get that filter off. So I usually just give it a nice tiny bit of lube, just the final run on the surface, and then I put it back again. So how you put back the oil filter is you basically wind it down till you can see or feel that it's now on surface at the bottom. Then you tighten it by hand as much as you can. Then thereafter you put over the filter strap, and you just give it a almost like not even a quarter of a turn. I just always say you just nip it with the filter strap. So you don't over tighten it, you just give it that final 5 to 10 degrees of turning of the filter. So it's just that. That's one. That's pretty much it, then it's fine. So again, turning it anti-clockwise, or to the left is loose, and to the right hand side will be tightening the sump plug. So that's the general rule of thumb. On the oil for the sump, when you do tighten it, please take care not to over tighten it and strip the thread, because you will have then one major shit show going forward, getting that repaired or driving to your next destination. So I think you're looking in a region of about 25 to 30 Newton meters of torque, tightening it up again. And voila. Do take note though that after you've removed the sump plug, sometimes that little sealer washer stays behind, so it gets stuck to the surface of the sump. So make sure you remove that before you put the new washer back on again. Otherwise you're going to sit with two washers on top of one another. That might potentially cause some oil leakage. Okay, so there's the oil sump plug all nicely dried and cleaned up again. There's the new sealing washer. It's like a Teflon type of material. Slot it over, and then you can put the plug back into the sump again and tighten it up. Okay, so when it comes to the fuel filter, the diesel filter, I usually intact or in place, you will see there's a little ring section here at the top, towards the top, so that you will just turn anti-clockwise as well. And just take this little cable off to make things a little bit easier. So okay, I'm going to require both hands for this. Just lift it towards the top. Separate the filter from the top part of the housing. And then I also usually take this bottom section out and go and rinse it out to make sure there's no sludge or water or anything out of the ordinary besides diesel at the bottom of it before I put it back with the new filter again. There's the bucket. There's the fuel. So the only reason I'm doing this is just to have an indication if there's any water or anything that was caught up by the filter in the housing at the bottom. Make sure I put it back as clean as possible, so then it's nice and serviceable for the next 10,000 kilometers. So usually what I do is I'll just give it like a brief inspection to see what it looks like. You can see this filter is actually still squeaky clean. It's got some slight color change on the sides here, but that's normal. It should have. If it doesn't have any discoloration, it means it's not doing its job by catching all the debris. So, but usually I've had filters that you can, at the top side here, you can already see some discoloration as well. So, but that's normal. There's different takes on this. Some people will skip the filter because it's expensive to service. I myself religiously I change it every 10,000 kilometers with the oil change as well, because as soon as any tiny bit of debris passes this filter and goes through the fuel system, the diesel fuel pump, the injectors and everything, there's permanent damage there, and you're definitely shortening the life by having that happening. So I rather change this than what I end up changing the fuel pump or the injectors unnecessary. Here is a brand new filter, squeaky clean. So compared to that one, it doesn't look too bad. And this also indicates to me that the specific fill stations or fuel stations that I use and the fuel that I use is fairly clean, as the filter is not extremely dirty. So that's a good indication of the fuel that I use is fairly clean, and that is also something positive. On this side of the diesel filter in order just to bleed the system and make sure all the air is out, so afterwards when you start your vehicle it doesn't die on you. Pump it over here until the fuel comes out, and then you're okay. You're good to go. Again, also before you open up here to start filling up the engine oil, I always make double sure that it is squeaky clean here, because every little bit of dirt that goes into this system is guaranteed going to give you more wear and tear and potentially more issues down the line. So make sure everything is squeaky clean. Alright, so when you made it this far, you're pretty much halfway with the servicing, and you can start filling up all the components again with the correct lubrication, which I'll explain later on. And make sure all your drain plugs has been put back and tightened up first before you start filling up. And here's the same concept for the air filter. I remove what I can that is dirt related in order to make sure it doesn't enter the system potentially in any way. So here as well you can see the difference between the old and the new filter. So what I've been doing with the old one is I usually just inspect it, then dust it out a little bit with compressed air from the inside outwards and not from the outside inwards.
Chill. Okay.
Dat wat dan verby die filter kom, hier vanaf gaan dit motor toe. Nou kyk gou hierso. Neem jy?
Ja, ek neem nog heel tyd.
So do take note on the air filter, the box, the new one, there's a little bag of lube. Looks similar to Vaseline. So what the purpose of this is you have to apply some of it over here on this little edge, and what I usually do is I take additional Vaseline and I make sure this whole section here is filled up thoroughly, and this is just to ensure that absolutely no dust can pass the surface between the air filter housing on the vehicle and this rubber housing of the filter itself. It's just to make sure that it is 110% sealed off for any dust not to be able to pass here. So this is what came from that little sealed bag inside the box. This is actually enough for what we need. But when I do smaller services, the 10,000 intervals between the major services like this one, then I would wipe the filter off. I'll get some Vaseline and I will reapply this surface with more Vaseline in order to do the insurance of a dust-free intake system, which I think is one of the two most important bits and pieces understanding your car. Your fuel system is main priority. That should remain as clean as possible at all times, meaning change the filter rather too many times than too little times, and air intake for dust contamination is the other most critical part, I would say. If you can look after those two, the longevity and the lifespan and the reliability of your vehicle then in return will look after you. Squeeze it all the way in, and then you lower it into the position where it's supposed to go. You will see automatically if it's in a position it's supposed to be. The clips pulling the filter housing down will go on without any resistance. If there's too much resistance, then just recheck your placement of the filter, because that means it didn't seat properly. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. We've done a all lubrication filter, we've done a diesel filter. It's nice and tight and secure, it's bleeded up, all the air is out. We did fill up the engine oil, cap is back on, air filter's just been done. Front differential, this is the more tricky one of the lot. That's the drain plug for the front diff, which is not the most challenging. What is challenging is that filler plug. If you can see it over there, there's an Allen key type plug here, right there, just next to the side shaft going out here to the right hand top of it. They both take a 10mm Allen key tool, so drain plug 10mm Allen key and the filler plug up there as well, and this is the more tricky one in order to fill up again afterwards. So just a small piece of advice or tricks of the trade, like they will call it. Sometimes these front differential plugs tend to be very sticky. So instead of just putting in the Allen key and forcing it all the way until it breaks loose, you might end up stripping the actual keyway inside the plug. So sometimes I just use a hammer, tap it a little bit in order to shock it to get loose, and then it actually loosens very easily, so you don't run the risk of stripping the plug. So looking at the drain plug, they usually come with some form of magnetic surface as well, so that you can have all that fine, very fine metal wear particles all accumulated to one point instead of floating around between the components in the diff and causing more unnecessary wear and tear. So if you see this on your differential plug when you drained it, that's absolutely normal. There's nothing wrong. It's just normal wear and tear, metal filings, very, very fine metal filings that accumulates onto the magnet. Right, so all that I do, if you can have a look there, is I just clean it up nicely with a cloth. Make sure that it's nice and clean for the fresh intake of any wear and tear particles, and you can apply the same method for the rear axle or the rear differential, as well as the transfer and the transmission drain plugs as well, should they have magnet based drain plug. And make sure you put the drain plug with the magnet base back at the bottom, in other words the draining plug of the two. Don't put it at the leveling plug, because all the heavy metals and stuff goes down to the bottom in order to catch it to be caught onto the magnet. So make sure you put this back into the draining plug and not back into the filler plug side of it. And then for those with the manual transmissions or gearboxes, on the right hand side lower end is the drain plug for the gearbox. So there's the filler plug for the gearbox. It's pretty much just next to or above the front prop shaft or drive shaft, as some of you might call it. And on the other side is the draining plug for the oil. The drain plug for the transfer case, and the leveling or filler and leveling plug for the transfer case. So you'll be draining the oil from here. Once you're done, put this back in, open that one up, fill it up until it starts running out of the hole, and then you know it's on level, put back that plug as well. One is like that, and now it's on level. Close it up. So for the rear axle or the rear differential, it's fairly easy as well. It's quite obvious. The drain plug sits right pretty much at the bottom. Filler plug sits towards the rear, almost halfway of the housing. So same story, you'll be loosening this one, draining the oil out until it's completely done, put it back in again, and then you will start filling up here until it starts pouring out at a constant flow from the rear axle. Then you know it's on level, and then you can close that plug as well. Yes, I've just finished filling up the front differential, and like I said before, the front especially is quite a mission. If you're using these normal bottle type filling tubes that you get from Toyota, the dealerships. So I usually do that one first in order to get it over with. So when it's running out like that constantly, like it is doing now, you can see it's pretty much full. That's when you know you're on spec or on the level. That's it. Now it's running out nicely. You can see it's full. And then I just close it off. Then down here we've done the front differential, we've done a transmission oil, we've done a transfer case oil. I had to check all the plugs. I'm about to lubricate the prop shaft, and we've done the rear differential as well. So the prop shaft going to the rear diff or axle, greasing point, center bearing, greasing point, no greasing point on the slip joint area, and then another greasing point on the rear diff. And then the same scenario for the front prop shaft or drive shaft. You will see there's the lubrication point over there for the front, and for the rear as well there in the center. So usually with the greasing of the crosses on a prop shaft, you just grease it enough so that you can see this fresh grease coming out of the seals. You don't over grease it so that everything gets covered in grease. You can also hear, I don't think you'll hear it on the camera, but it makes like a crackling sound as well. That's usually an indication that the grease is on the way out, and then just a little bit more until you can visually see it, and then that's enough for what's needed. So the book says every 10,000 kilometers, but what I tend to do on the rear prop shaft, especially on the Hilux, I tend to grease it every 5,000. Just give it a top up, then you know the bearings and the joints doesn't have the risk of running dry at all. Just another service tip for when you do planning on attending to do your own service on your vehicle. Please make sure that you have enough oil and the correct filters beforehand, rather than what you start draining or stripping off the filters, and then halfway through the process you realize that you might have the incorrect filters or not sufficient oil, and you can't fill up your car, and in other words you can't really then move it safely or drive it or get to where you need to be afterwards. Especially if you're planning on doing it on weekends and the shops might be closed. So yeah, just make sure you do your planning beforehand. Just keep in mind that I am a qualified technician now, so I do think I know the difference between water and oil, but it doesn't mean it might be the case in everybody that attends doing their own service. So yeah, please make sure that you follow the book or follow the guideline from the service centers or OEMs in order to keep things safe first of all, and also just to make sure that you do not cause more damage or harm than what you do good. In our case, I've been doing the 40,000 kilometer interval, which is pretty much a major service. So that's all your lubricants and filters. So that's from front to back, engine oil and filter, diesel filter, air filter. We've got a manual vehicle, so it's the manual transmission fluid, the transfer case fluid, and then both front and rear axle lubricants as well. They had to be changed. On the normal 10,000 hour intervals on the Toyotas, on this specific model, you only do what we call a lube service, so that'll be your engine oil and filter and your diesel filter mostly on the 10,000 kilometer intervals. Alright, so as with most manufacturers, they've got their recommended lubricants and filters that you can or should be using, depending on the part of the world that you live in. So what I mean by that is you get different viscosities or different types of oil. On an engine, as an example, you get either a 15W40, which is the most common in South Africa that we use. You get 10W40, you even get like 10W60 or 5W60 type oil. In my particular case, I use 5W40 on this vehicle, and the W in the W portion of the oil usually stands for winter grade. So let's say your ambient average temperature in South Africa during winter season is anything between give or take 5 degrees Celsius. The number after the W usually indicates the summer ambient temperature. So again, in South Africa, in broad perspective, we are all fairly used to anything between 25 to 45 degrees Celsius, depending on which part of South Africa you live in. So again, using an oil that covers both those spectrums is fairly important in my opinion. In our case, I like to use the Shell 5W40 fully synthetic oil, whether it's the Shell Helix Ultra or the HX. They're both very good oil. Depending on what brand you are into, I always try and recommend as a general rule of thumb to the people that if you are planning on keeping and using your vehicle for a long time to come, rather spend a bit of extra money, use fully synthetic engine oil and get the maximum lifespan and problem-free experience with your vehicle's engine. If you have a vehicle that's on a service plan, obviously you service it by the dealers, but anything out of service plan, multi-grade oil is fine, 15W40 is fine, semi-synthetic is fine. I think the important bit to stress here is not to chop and change between, let's say one service you use multi-grade oil, the next service you use fully synthetic, the service after again you use semi-synthetic. That is usually in the long run not very healthy for an engine. So rather decide on what type of oil you want to use and stick to that grade and that level of quality, and just keep servicing the car or the vehicle with that specific oil. Don't chop and change between the oil types. So every 40,000 I put this into the axles, front and rear, and I put this guy into the transmission and the transfer case. So, but again, refer to the manual if you're not sure, or approach your dealer if you're not sure. Most importantly, don't skip services, and especially on the diesel systems and the lubrication, the engine oil systems, if where possible, I would deter completely using aftermarket filters. I know there's lots of arguments and stories around this, as such with the oil as well. I've heard plenty of guys over the years say, yeah, but the filters comes out of the same factory, they just label them differently. It is actually not the case. They might come from the same factory, but they definitely do not undergo the same quality checks and inspections and level of material going into the filters as what the OEM filters does. And this I've got a personal experience with multiple times that I've seen for myself, that when you put the aftermarket filter next to the OEM filter, or even if you take them apart, the quality and the quantity of the material that gets put into the filter is simply not the same than that of the OEM spec. So again, stressing the point of looking after your vehicle. If you want to keep it for a long time, rather spend a bit of extra money, buy the OEM spec filters, and use proper oil and service it regularly, and you will have, most likely compared to others around you, a troublesome and problem-free vehicle going forward for many years to come. The important thing here to stress is the level of cleanliness when going about working with the oil, and especially the fuel system again. Make sure that your hands and the area around that section or portion that you're going to work on is super clean or fairly clean, because any little bit of debris that might end up falling into the system might end up contaminating, or even worse, damaging your components internally, which is unwanted. So again, usually I try and rate the difficulty when it comes to DIY stuff. For rating a normal lubricant service on your vehicle's engine, I would say you can rate it about 3 or 4 out of 10, being 1 being extremely easy and 10 being extremely difficult. So I think 3 or 4, or even 3 to 5 out of 10, depending on your skill level. But yeah, have fun, and I hope you enjoyed watching the video. And again, as per usual, for those of you that have subscribed over the years and been watching our content, thank you very much in doing so. If you haven't subscribed yet, please feel free to do so by clicking the subscribe button down below. And stay safe, keep well, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.